G'day legends, it's Mark here from North Oz, and in today's video we're going to be covering a question that you guys asked me in my last video where I was talking about my FJ Cruiser, and it is about four-wheel drive insurance and making sure that you aren't spending too much money on your insurances, but also making sure that if something does go wrong that you are properly insured and that your excess isn't going to be ridiculous. And there's a couple of things that I found with a couple of these insurance companies that I think you guys might be interested in. So stick around for today's video. It's going to be a bit of an interesting one. If this is the first time here on the channel, my name is Mark and this is my channel, North Oz, where I do off-grid, off-road, sort of travel and four-wheel drive builds. It's all pretty much to do with four-wheel driving in some way, shape or form. That's kind of where I've been headed for the last 4 years. I really love it. I've really enjoyed tinkering on the vehicles and sharing my tips and tricks with you guys. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. So to do that, I've got two vehicles. I've got a 2013 Toyota FJ Cruiser and I've got a 2023 Toyota Land Cruiser 79 Series dual cab. It's the workmate model, so the very bottom of the models, which was the one that I actually really wanted. And I've got around $40,000, probably a little bit more in accessories on this vehicle. So that's important for what we're going to be talking about today, which is about four-wheel drive specific insurances and whether or not that really exists. So it's going to be a bit of an interesting one today, like I said, and it is something that you guys have requested. And it is something that, like, there are a lot of hidden kind of, what's the word I want to say? A lot of hidden statements in a lot of the PDSs that I've found. And that's something that I want to share with you guys today with some exact examples. So let's get straight into the very first thing that I have here on my list. So I think it's important to get this out of the way first, as I'm not sponsored by any of the insurance companies or any insurance companies at all at this point, the point of making this video. So that is important because this is my own money that I have used to be able to insure my vehicles. And it is not cheap. So insurance went up a lot, and that's my very first point here, is that insurance went up a lot, especially over the last year or two. I'm not sure if that's just specific here to Cairns, but it sounds like it's kind of everywhere at this point, even all over the world, where insurances are going through the roof. So once I started, paying from that kind of $1,200, and then I was starting to get quotes up around $1,800 without any modifications and accessories, and then I was starting to get quotes well over $2,000, and well over $2,000 I mean. That's when I really started looking at these as kind of, products that I would put on any vehicle where I start doing my research. So it is a lot of money to spend, $2,000 to $2.5 grand. I want to make sure that I'm going to get the best bang for my buck. So that is the first thing, is that once I had Toyota insurance before, I'm going with the people that I'll talk about in a minute. But I had Toyota insurance before, and then their prices started to creep up a little bit. So then that made me start to think, well, maybe Toyota insurance isn't the best value for money at this point. So a couple of things that I need to talk about as well is that, like I said, this is an off-roading sort of channel. So there is going to be a lot of risk involved when I'm getting my insurance. And I understand that. And I'm willing to pay a little bit extra to be able to make sure that my vehicles, and I can put my vehicles in situations where I'm able to do the river crossings, do the camping, do some of the riskier things. And I don't mind paying a little bit extra just to make sure that my vehicle is 100% covered. So that was, again, a really important thing, that I really want to make sure that I'm insured properly. So there's no corner cutting here at all. So that's something that you'll find out as we progress through this video. So I'll be talking specifically about my experience with 3 insurance companies. So some of the bigger ones, but there are other bigger companies and there are other insurance companies out there that you can do your research on as well, just so you guys know. So, and I have talked about Toyota insurance, but I won't be including them in today's discussion. So the very first thing that I can give you some advice about, if you're kind of wondering, or if you're new to this, or if you are wanting to kind of, like me, take another deep dive into your insurances, is that the PDSs tell you everything you need to know. So if you have a look at, say, for example, Club 4x4 PDS, and you go into their documents and you download that and you have a look through, you're going to find 40 to 50 pages of whatever insurance company that you choose. You'll find a huge document about all the things that they do and don't cover, and all the excesses and all the information that they have to include as part of their job, as part of insuring our vehicles. So the PDSs will tell you everything you need to know. So if you learn nothing else from this video, it should be that you should go into the PDS of the insurance company that you're interested in and have a deep dive into that. Make it your nighttime reading, Don't do what I did, which is wait until a few days before your insurance runs out. And so you're doing a whole pile of reading in the one go, which is good because I got a lot of information from it. But if it was me, if I had my time again, I would definitely do it a few weeks beforehand so I could ring around and get a few more quotes and things like that. So it's always good to have a look at that PDS of every insurance company that you're interested in, and then highlight some of the things that you're not too sure on, because everything that you want to know about that insurance product will be in that PDS. So that's the first thing. One of the things that I look for in those PDS is how many pages and kind of how much information is laid out in that PDS. So I don't mind having a lot of information in the PDSs, but it has to be easily accessible. It has to be ordered correctly. So we're not having things about excess in one section and then there is a little bit of a secret excess in a couple of pages or a few pages down. That's not what I like. So once I start seeing that, that starts to go off as a little bit of a warning in my head. Also the language that they use. If they're using some complicated language to describe just basic things, that's when I start to get a little bit concerned as well. So I'll highlight or I'll just make a note of any of the things that don't quite make sense to me, or some of the things that I'm just, the wording is a bit vague on, because that is something that I found as well, is that a lot of the wording can be very vague. I'm also very mindful, like I said, where the information is placed. So if the information is scattered all throughout the document, it's not very organized, it makes me start to think that maybe some of that information didn't want to be found, if that makes sense. So not being deceitful or anything like that, but it's maybe that they could have done a better job organizing it, and that way nothing will kind of slip under your radar for when you're making a decision. So as an example, so Club 4x4, even though they are laid out differently, slightly differently, Club 4x4's PDS was 43 pages, whereas UE, which was one of the companies we're going to be talking about today, is about 31 pages, closer to 30 because the last page is blank. So what I liked about UE compared to Club 4x4, and we're just going to get straight into some comparisons, guys, is that UE had the crucial information up front, which was what I like. So all the information was all laid out, what we do cover. That was something that I really liked about UE. Whereas with Club 4x4, was kind of some of their stuff was put closer towards the end or the middle of the document, which was something that I was like, oh, I got to like page 26 and I was like, hang on, wait a second. This is actually really important information for a four-wheel drive owner trying to insure my four-wheel drive. This is actually really important information. Why isn't that on like the first few pages? So that for me kind of, even though I'm sure it wasn't meant to be like that, for me it kind of sends again some alarm bells, and just that I'm looking at these documents and I'm like, oh, well, that information would have been handy at the very beginning, as opposed to going through the quote process and everything and then realizing after reading the whole PDS that there is a significant excess, which we're going to talk about. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything about the PDSs. They'll tell you everything you need to know, and and it is a really good place to start. And it is a long read, and it does require your attention. So I definitely recommend putting aside maybe one for each night or something like that. Have your highlighter handy, that sort of thing. So the second thing we'll move on to is you learn a lot about these companies by calling them. And I might be a bit old school like that, where I'm thinking that, very like kind of face-to-face sort of thing, where I want to actually talk to someone before I spend $2.5 grand or $2 grand on something. So I called up, these are the three main companies we're talking about today. I called up UE, I called up Club 4x4, and I called up RACQ, who I do have roadside assistance with. So I called up, those three companies, and out of those three companies, I was most confident with UE. Club 4x4 were great though, so I didn't really have too many issues with, actually talking with them and that, but, they were still great, but they didn't really instill that confidence that UE kind of instilled, if that makes sense. So I really liked the fact that, that UE really asked the four-wheel drive kind of specific questions, and they kind of got it, if that makes sense. RACQ, they had me on the phone for over an hour, and they didn't quite get what they weren't picking up what I was putting down. So I was talking about my four-wheel drive, I was talking about how, it's got modifications to it that's, worth over $30,000, and they just weren't getting it. So, and I was trying to explain to them that my vehicle, although it's a 2023 model, it is worth more money now, on the market. Its market value would be worth more than what it is now. because this is only a $75,000 car. But if I had to replace this vehicle today, I'm looking at close to $100,000. So when I was trying to explain that RACQ, it just wasn't really sinking in. And they had to keep putting me on hold for like 3-4 minutes at a time every time I volunteered new information. So it might be that, I have a YouTube channel and I'm using it for my YouTube. So that's what I want it to be insured like as a business kind of. So that's every time I volunteered new information, RACQ just kind of, again, just put me on hold, had to talk to my manager, put me on hold, had to talk to my manager. And a lot of those questions weren't difficult. A lot of them were just like, I've got, $30,000 in modifications I want to insure. And they just weren't quite getting that. So talking to these people was very interesting. And UE were great. We rifled through a lot of questions. They're based here in Queensland as well, which was also cool too. They made that very clear, which is obviously a big selling point. They're clear to understand, and like every question that I had, they were able to answer. And I think they put me on hold once just because they couldn't really find the way to classify my business, which I think ended up being like music singer or something like that. It was something weird, but they again worked with me to make sure that we had the right classification for what I'm doing, which is the YouTube sort of stuff. So yeah, that was kind of one of the main things is that I was really impressed by calling up. I was really impressed with UE. RACQ held me on the line for a long time, and Club 4x4, after I kind of called them up and said, hey, I'm interested in doing this, this, and this, they were kind of like, okay, cool. That's the best price we can do. And that was the end of the conversation. So that kind of gives you a bit of an idea for, those three companies, me calling up, that was my experience. And obviously these are all just my opinions, and that was my experience that I told you guys, but through spending hours and hours on the phone with these people. So the third thing is something that I've already kind of touched on, which was just pretty much that UE were very interested in, one, my business, but two, they were very interested in talking with me about my specific use for the vehicle. So when I called up RACQ, like I said, they didn't quite get it. They weren't quite understanding the fact that I was doing the off-roading and I was filming it and it was for a business as well somehow. So they just didn't quite understand what I was trying to do. Club 4x4, they kind of got it, but they kind of like glazed over it, and then they gave me a quote and that was it. Okay, so that was kind of like UE kind of kept me, they kind of kept giving me questions about the specifics, like every specific thing on the quote. They wanted to make sure to try to make their quote the most competitive, and also not to have any extra, rubbish on there, not to have any of the extra things that I don't need on there. So there's a lot of things on insurances. I mean, you just call up or get a quote for them, and it's endless the amount of things that you can get insured. Everything from like personal effects in the vehicle, and there's a lot of things. But what I liked about you is they went through and they explained every single one. They did it quickly, concisely, and then they're like, okay, if you don't need it, get rid of it. This is your new quote price. And then I actually went back to them with a different quote price from somewhere else. And they said, okay, we can kind of give you this price, but that is the best that we can do. So at least they were open to have a conversation. Like I said, I might be a bit old school in that I like to call up and ring around a little bit and actually try to have a conversation with someone. Because if I'm trusting my Land Cruiser, it's not just about $2.5 grand. If I'm trusting my Land Cruiser, which is a lot of money and a lot of money to me, I want to make sure that it's in good hands, or as in the best hands as possible. And the way I can do that, the way I figure that out, is that I just have to have a conversation with someone and just know that if something goes wrong, I can pick up the phone and I can call them and someone will be there to answer my call. So that's kind of a long-winded version of basically saying that they understood the aftermarket accessories that I have on the vehicle and understood how to insure them. But whereas RACQ didn't really quite get it, and Club 4x4 just weren't really super interested. They just kind of gave me the quote, like, yep, this is it, boom, done, next call. That's the vibe that I got anyway. So the fourth thing, and this is like if you made it this far, this is probably the most important thing out of all the points that I have here so far as a four-wheel driver, is that the water excess was something that I was really interested in, and I didn't even know was a thing. So apparently some companies like Club 4x4, they have a special excess. If you say, for example, go through a river crossing and your vehicle fills with water, or if, basically if there's any water damage. And that's the way that I read it, was that if there's any water damage at all, you have to pay, or it's that, river crossing excess, you have to pay a minimum of $2,000. So it doesn't matter if your excess was $500, you've been paying a higher premium. Your minimum of your excess is going to be $2,000. It doesn't matter if your vehicle's worth $5,000. Doesn't matter if your vehicle's worth, $50,000. Your excess is going to be a minimum $2,000. And it says, or 5%. So either way, you're paying $2,000. Now, if you have a vehicle like mine, which is worth nearly $150,000, your excess is going to be $7.5 grand. Now, that wasn't made very clear until you actually scroll down to page 26 or something like that, which is very near the end of the document. It's more than halfway anyway. And I was like, oh, for Club 4x4, I was thinking, well, this is like your biggest selling point, like that's the first thing they have. And I'm sure that they advertise on this YouTube channel. They probably advertised on this video right now. But that was just something that just kind of stood out to me, was that you guys advertise being a Club 4x4. So, you advertise basically, just four-wheel drive insurance. And yet one of the main sources of risk, which are river crossings, you're going to provide, you're going to, I guess you're going to apply quite a high excess for something where, it's just an accident. It can happen like anything else. So that brings me to Yui. So once I looked at that, I got on the phone with Yui and I said, well, what do you guys do? And I went through and highlighted a few things on the PDS and I said, well, what do you guys do for water crossings? And they said, we have no extra excesses or anything like that, nothing at all. And I didn't find it in their PDS either, which was why I was asking. And then they said, yep, so we don't have it in our PDS because we don't have an additional water excess or anything like that. And they said, as long as you're using the vehicle within its, design for its design purpose, which I assume means within the vehicle manufacturer specification sort of thing, then you will be covered no matter what, just like any other normal accident. So, I mean, if you're going up to, river crossings and it's going well above, the bonnet and stuff, that's probably, in my opinion, it's probably not using it for its intended purpose. And at that point, you're taking a risk. So in that regard, I would say, well, if Club 4x4 are going to insure you for using the vehicle, going over river crossings that high and you flood your car, well, then you probably should go with Club 4x4. I don't intend on using the vehicle, and I will not be using the vehicle outside of its specifications, for example. And so that's why I went with Yui. So I don't plan on dipping this vehicle, because it's a touring rig, I don't plan on dipping this vehicle beyond what the vehicle manufacturer specifications are. And I will not be using this vehicle outside of what it is designed to do, which is the exact words that they used, what it was designed to do. So that for me was kind of a bit of a deciding point as well, because it's like, well, if I'm gonna have to spend $7.5 grand as a minimum of an excess, if the vehicle goes underwater anyway, it's like, at that point, is it really worth it? And that to me was just something that I was like, well, no, I'm not going to use the vehicle outside of it. And then I also asked you as well, I said, well, what happens if, there's a weather event or something, like say the tide comes up and your vehicle is stuck, for example. And the conversation I had with them was that, well, that's not, you're using the vehicle within its design specifications. So that's not your fault. And that will be, as long as you're not using it on like illegal roads, for example, or doing anything illegal, I suppose. And then that will, you'll be covered like normal. So that was something that I was really impressed with, is that they were able to articulate that to me, which gave me a lot of confidence in their product. Now, that's it. I'm all out of notes. But that tells me, in kind of summary, that tells me a couple of things. It also tells me that I really liked Yui's customer service. So that was one thing that really drew me to it. They said that now I did end up getting the vehicle insured at market value. And when they explained what market value is to me, which was that they will find comparable listings, similar kilometers and that, they'll pay that out. And also I've got, I think, $30,000 in accessories, which I can come very close to, if not, but I can come very close to replacing the accessories on this vehicle. Now, I would probably ideally like to get it up to probably 40,000 if I could, but I think that there are some limits. I can't remember exactly, so I did do this a couple months ago, but there were some limits that you can put on those. But I think it was a point of diminishing returns at that point anyway. So I think we just went with 30,000 this time. But that just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea, my experience. And like I said, this is just my personal customer experience using my money. That's what I experienced across those three companies. Now, the other thing was, like I said, this is just my experience, but the other thing this is the wild card in all this, is that the payout. I don't know what these companies are going to be like when it comes to payouts. Club 4x4 might be really good at payouts, or RACQ might be really good at payouts. UE might be fantastic and quick at payouts, but I just don't know that. So this is me just kind of taking a little bit of a gamble, I suppose, but like all insurances are like that. All insurance, any insurance can take time to pay out. They may not pay out. These are the things that, you know, as we as customers kind of just take for granted. And I'm just hoping, this is the assumption through this whole video, is that the companies will all pay out at the same amount of time. That's the assumption. And based on the conversations that I had with the people, which I spent a lot of time on the phone with, the quotes that I got, and reading through the company's PDSs, that I felt the most comfortable insuring with UE. Now, there are other companies out there that you guys can have a look at, like Amy, and you know, there's heaps of them. You know, you've got all the subsidiaries of all these different banks and stuff that have theirs as well. So, you know, do your all I'm trying to say, and I hope that this is what you've kind of gotten from today's video, is just do your research, and also get on the phone and call if there's any questions that you have. Like that's the main thing, is that you've got to call these guys up and get some clarity around the product. Now, if you're like me, you'll call them up and you'll probably end up getting you know, a lot of vague answers. Now, like I said, UE were really great because they actually gave me some, like I gave them specific examples. I said, if I'm going to be up in the Victorian high country and, you know, my vehicle slips off an edge, they said, as long as you're using it within the vehicle manufacturer's specifications, you're fine, you know, what it was designed for. So I you know, held them on the phone for a bit and actually gave them some specific answers, but questions, but they also, you know, did kind of go through that whole like generic sort of answer, because they can't definitively say, and that's something that I found across all of the insurance companies, that they can't say, yes, we definitely will. They kind of they refer back to basically their statements, which is in the PDS anyway. So I hope that gives you guys a little bit of an idea of what four-wheel drive insurance is all about. If you have any questions, put them down in the comment section. If I missed anything, or if you had different experiences with different companies, please, and if you've had a vehicle as well that's been written off, that you've had a payout from, please let me know down in the comment section. I'm always willing to try new insurance further down the track. You know, my FJ Cruiser is coming up for new insurance soon anyway, so I will be again taking another dive into some of the other companies, so I'm happy to do an update on this video as well. So if you guys have any questions, or you have some experiences of your own on four-wheel drive insurances, please let me know down in the comment section. And as always, guys, I always learn so much from you, so please make sure you chuck your experiences down in the comment section. Alrighty, guys, I'll see you down there, and I'll see you very shortly in the next video anyway. Take care.